They seemed like the perfect family. A loving husband and wife, their 5 young children, and the adventure of a lifetime. This Midwestern family uprooted their lives in Minnesota and moved to rural Africa to, in their words, spread Christianity and God's love. But when the mission was nearing an end date, officials say the wife took matters into her own hands. She's now been formally charged in her husband's murder. Officials believe she plotted to have him killed and even created a ruse with her lover, all in an effort to stay. This case largely takes place overseas, but it starts right here in the United States, specifically in Detroit Lakes, Minnesota. It's a somewhat rural area in the eastern part of the state. It's not too far from Fargo, North Dakota. It's also where the Shroyer family lived. The mother and wife, Jackie Shroyer, and the father, Beau Shroyer, plus their 5 kids, ages ranging from 9 to 17. For a time, Beau worked as a police officer and a realtor in Detroit Lakes, but he left all of that to answer a higher calling. According to a GoFundMe page, Beau was dedicating his life to sharing hope and love in communities far from home. With a heart full of faith and compassion, Beau's mission was to make a difference and spread kindness wherever he went. So in 2021, Beau and Jackie packed up their bags and moved to Angola, Africa, to become missionaries for the organization SIM USA. In an interview with the Detroit Lakes Tribune before the family left, the couple said they were moving to a remote bush village that didn't even have electricity. They said their mission was to bring Christianity to that region. Now, this mission lasted for several years, but late last year in 2024, their time in Angola was wrapping up. That meant the mission was nearly over and the family had plans to leave Africa. Investigators now believe Beau's wife, Jackie, didn't want to leave. They say a motive in Beau's murder was that Jackie wanted to stay behind with her lover. That's 24-year-old Bernardino Isaac Elias, who also allegedly was the security guard of their home. The Angola press agency reports that local investigators believe there were strong suspicions of a romantic relationship between the person who ordered the crime, that would be Jackie, and her accomplice, the guard at the couple's residence. All of this brings us up to October of last year, when officials say Jackie became the mastermind of this murder-for-hire plot. She apparently offered $50,000 in exchange for the murder of her husband, Beau. In the days leading up to that, she apparently visited the area that would eventually become the future crime scene. All of this was basically in an effort to plot things out with the 2 assailants. So on October 25th, investigators say Jackie lured her husband to that predetermined location where the other suspects had been posted up and they were pretending to have car trouble. In reality, officials say they rented a car earlier in the day, all as part of this ruse. So while Jackie was off in the woods, Beau was stabbed to death. He was later found in his vehicle. The following month, Jackie was arrested in connection to Beau's murder. Her apparent lover, Bernardino Elias, was also arrested, as was another man, that's 23-year-old Isalan Masalinga Kayo, who goes by the nickname Vin Diesel. Some outlets are reporting that another accomplice was also involved. That would be 22-year-old Gelson Guerrero Ramos, who apparently was on the run back in November. No word on whether he was actually involved or if he's been taken into custody. Now, Law&Crime reported on this story last fall, but now there's been a new development in the case. Jackie has officially been charged as co-author in her husband's murder. This news comes from the Shroyer family church back in Minnesota. That's the Lakes Area Vineyard Church. The lead pastor put out a notice to their congregation just this week. It reads in part, quote, "It saddens me immensely to have to share with you that we were notified that Jackie has been formally charged as a co-author in the murder of her husband. As a result of formal charges, it is our understanding that she will remain in custody and tried before a judge. The court date has not yet been set, but will likely occur within the next 6 months. Beau and Jackie's children will continue to be cared for by a close family with support from both SIM and Lakes Area Vineyard Church." SIM also released a statement after news of Jackie's arrest. It reads in part, quote, "Following the formal charging of Jackie Shroyer in connection with recent events in Lubangu, Angola, SIM is working closely with her legal team to determine the most appropriate next steps. She continues to be held in custody, supported by SIM colleagues and others. Her children, now residing in the USA, are being cared for by close family with support from SIM counselors. We are also providing ongoing care for our teams in Angola and the United States, ensuring they have access to the resources they need during this difficult time. We are deeply thankful for the prayers and support from around the world. We ask for continued prayer for all those impacted by this tragedy." Hey, by the way, I know we have a lot of sponsors on Law and Crime, and we appreciate you supporting them and supporting us. But we'd really like to know from all of you, what do you like? We created a 5-question survey that takes less than 30 seconds to fill out. You tell us what kind of brands and products you use so we can make sure to put the right companies in front of you. There's some incentive in all of this too. If you fill out the survey as a thank you, we will randomly select 5 of you and send you free Law and Crime t-shirts. So please fill out our survey at lawandcrime.com/survey. Again, it takes less than 30 seconds and you could get some free Law and Crime merch. Now, this is a heavy case. It's complicated. We've got Americans overseas. We've got some pretty serious allegations, a lot happening, and I want to bring in an expert to talk a bit more about it. That's international attorney David Tafiri. David, thank you so much for coming on with us yet again. And I wanted to start with kind of a basic question. When you and I have talked in the past, we've usually worked on stories that are out of the United Kingdom or Australia. But this one's out of Africa, so it's a bit different. Is it largely different from what we face here in the United States as far as their criminal justice system?
It's somewhat different. Angola was part of the Portuguese Empire, and it didn't become free and independent until 1975. And so its laws before 1975 were based on the Portuguese legal system. And they have retained some of those laws and some of the procedure from the Portuguese system, which is a civil law system, but then added to it, they passed a constitution in 2010 that guarantees some rights for the accused, and they have passed other laws that make the system slightly different from Portugal.
Oh, that's very interesting. Kind of a combined thing where they kept some stuff and then added others. That's interesting. My question though is it still for the defendant innocent until proven guilty? Is that the same thing over there?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Okay, great. That's good to kind of clear up. My next question, too, though, is this is a really serious allegation. We're talking about murder here. Obviously, the most severe here in the United States. I'm just going to assume it's the most severe allegation or charge you can face over there, too.
Yes, that's correct.
What sort of sentence could you face in all of that? Because I know here in some states it depends. You could face the death penalty, and others it's life in prison without parole. What sort of sentence, if you're convicted over there, would it look like?
Possibly life in prison without parole. I'm not aware of whether Angola has the death penalty or not.
Interesting. It'll be interesting to see. How does it change things, though, the fact that we have an American who was arrested over there? She's being held and detained over there. Does that complicate things at all?
I think it puts the spotlight on Angola and the Angolan criminal system, and they're going to have to work extra hard to make sure that she receives due process or there's an appearance of due process. She apparently has local lawyers and also U.S. lawyers representing her. The U.S. Embassy, of course, is also responsible for monitoring her case because she is a U.S. citizen, although she's accused of an egregious crime. They will still monitor it and want to make sure that she receives due process.
It's good to know that wherever we go, the American Embassy, the United States, is keeping watch on how things are going elsewhere. So that's good to keep in mind. We do know also in this case, the FBI is involved. So local investigators there in Angola, I guess, investigated all of this murder, but the FBI is involved too. Do you think they potentially could be involved in legal proceedings as far as if this goes to a jury trial? FBI agents could be called to testify, or would it only be probably local sources?
Yeah, I wouldn't expect that the FBI would be called to testify. I could see the FBI collaborating with the local police authorities to help them with the investigation, especially perhaps helping with forensic investigation. There's likely a representative of the FBI in the U.S. Embassy in Angola, and he may have a team that's supporting the authorities in Angola. But what the U.S. likes to do when a crime happens abroad, even if it involves an American, is to let the local authorities take the lead and then watch and make sure that they feel like justice is being done. It's also notable that they have two interests here, or at least two interests here. They have an interest in seeing that the accused receives a fair trial, but the person who was murdered was also an American, and they want to make sure that he and his family receive justice. And then they also have an interest because the couple had kids, which I think we'll probably talk about, and the U.S. probably wants to make sure that those kids are, appropriately, treated appropriately during this process.
You're right. There are so many layers to all of this. My mind automatically is going to the justice system over there, but we do have to keep in mind the victim and the children. So let's talk about them. As you said, they were over there for several years on this mission. Five children, none of them are 18 yet. The oldest is 17. So after this tragedy happens and their father is murdered, what happens next? I know the kids are now back in the United States with family, but in the interim, if their mom is taken into custody, what happens? What is the chain of command there?
Well, someone likely has been or will be appointed a guardian for the children. And my understanding is the children are being cared for by the church and the service that sent them over as missionaries, and also by friends of the family. Hopefully, that's resulting in good care, especially given the traumatic situation that the children are facing. And whether the children ultimately have to have a permanent guardian will likely depend upon what happens in the case and whether their mother is found guilty or not. I would also note, as you mentioned, one of the children is 17 and she's already been accepted to college. I expect that, hopefully she will be able to attend college in the United States, and then there would just be four dependents.
Another interesting aspect of this case is we have these Americans overseas, which unto itself we could talk about for hours. But the reason that they're there is they were missionaries. They were hoping to spread their Christian faith. And it's kind of ironic in a way now that the wife went there to spread this religious faith and is now accused of murdering her husband after allegedly committing adultery, having a lover, an affair on the side, which is a no no in Christianity. I mean, is that something that prosecutors would play up and talk about if it came time for a jury trial?
It's definitely possible, right? Because there's a lot of hypocrisy if she, in fact, did commit the crime that she's accused of, that she was there to help, that to teach good values, Christian values, and then participated in a crime. She, if the allegations are true, co opted, local Angolan citizens, including potentially her lover, to help her with this crime. So she actually spread criminal intent rather than spreading morality and the other good things that you learn from religion. So that's a really sad aspect of this case. And I imagine that will be part of the background to the case as the prosecutors present it at court.
You brought up a really good point in that she seemingly or allegedly lured two people into helping her, her lover, and then another person. So it kind of is like a murder for hire situation, which gets into my next question in that our defendant here, Jackie Schroyer, apparently did not actually carry out the murder. She didn't use a knife in any way. She didn't cut her husband. She didn't stab him, nothing. But she kind of orchestrated everything. So is that just as severe as committing the murder over there? What does that look like?
I think as I understand it, the prosecutorial documents note that she was a co-author. That's the phrase that they used of the murder, and so it is a murder charge. Because she didn't carry out the murder, I would expect that maybe the sentence will not be as harsh for her. But she was the ringleader, and there would be something like what we would call here in the U.S. a conspiracy charge as well, and so, she could face life in prison given that would have culpability for the murder if she is found guilty. And I would also kind of do like a but for analysis. But for her, this murder never would have occurred. It was her decision, her intent, premeditation by her, the planning, the organizing, the promise to pay that caused the murder to happen, if the allegations are true.
I think you're right. If I was a prosecutor, I would point to that as well. Maybe she didn't actually commit the murder, but for her, without her, we wouldn't have this situation at all. Another aspect about the case I wanted to talk about is this is apparently a really rural area. It didn't have electricity. We don't have cameras as we would sometimes have here. No ring doorbell, likely no cell phones. Does that make things more complicated as far as the investigation goes? Likely no witnesses, and then we don't have any recordings or cell phones or anything like that. Is that more tricky?
I think so, and I'm really interested to know how the police put together their case and what evidence they have. They seem pretty certain that she committed this murder. They have the knife, which was apparently a knife that the victim brought from the United States and gave to one of the people that are charged with the murder. But they must have other evidence, including evidence that demonstrate the relationship between the accused former wife and the murderers, and also they must have evidence that shows that there was planning. And I don't know what you know what that evidence is, whether there are documents that demonstrate that or not, or whether it's just witness testimony. I'm guessing, although I don't know, that perhaps one or two of the people who actually engaged in the murder have confessed or at least pointed the finger at her. And so that witness testimony could also be part of the evidence against her.
And the relationship between our defendant and her alleged lover in all of this. You brought that up. Now, I know here in America, we don't require a motive in order to yield a conviction, but it is something that we want to talk about, that jurors want to hear about, prosecutors probably want to present. And to me, it does seem like a pretty clear cut motive. She didn't want to have to go back to the United States, she wanted to stay with her new lover. What does all of that mean over there? Do they require a motive? Is it needed? Or will this just be useful for prosecutors?
I think it's like our system. They don't require a motive to prove that a person violated the law. However, it is probably very helpful to explain and give a basis for the defendant here to have planned this crime, so you can understand why she did it.
Talking about the relationship between those two, and you had mentioned potentially somebody may have already confessed. That's leading into my next question about flipping witnesses, because sometimes if you separate the two, one will talk about the other, kind of confess, make a deal with one another. Is that something you expect to see?
It sounds like that may be what is happening. And you could imagine that the Angolans who are accused of actually committing the murder, uh, there may be sufficient evidence against them that they want to cooperate, and that that's why they are pointing the finger at her. And it's that desire to cooperate that is motivating them, but they're also motivated by the potential to get credit for that cooperation, get a lesser sentence. And my guess is that there is probably better forensic evidence for them having engaged in the murder than there is for her. So their witness testimony could be essential for the prosecution of her.
I could definitely see that happening, them coming forward with more of this information, divulging it really to speak with investigators and tell them that new info. I'm wondering if that's kind of led to this next part of the case, the fact that they were taken into custody in November, but these official charges are just filed now in February, so several months later. Is it that prosecutors could have gotten some new evidence that they feel is good enough to bring the charge, or why would there have been that delay?
That could be the reason. It's also quite common in civil law systems like this that you get put in prison. You don't get necessarily get a speedy trial the way you would in the United States, and charges aren't usually sometimes aren't forthcoming right away. There's probably a lot of bureaucracy in the Angolan criminal system, so that bureaucracy may have also slowed down the process of announcing charges.
One thing's for sure, the bottom line of this story, it's so heartbreaking for the family of Beau Shroyer, his children, his family back here in the States. We're going to continue to follow it, though, and see what happens as it moves forward. David DeFury, thank you so much for coming on with us and talking about the case so far.
Thank you.
As for all the Shroyer kids, their church reports they are all back in the United States, and right now they're staying with family. Reporting for Law&Crime, I'm Gillespie.